Hello, and welcome to Afterlife. When I was in the hospital with my husband, I knew he had a matter of hours. And I can't describe to you what that felt like. And I also knew that we didn't really come from big families, so there weren't a lot of people to call. And all I could think of is who did I need to speak with? Who could bring me comfort? And so I waited until 3 a.m. Pacific, when it would be 6 a.m. in New York, so that I could call my friend Stephanie. Stephanie is my longest, dearest friend in the world, and we've been through so many ups and downs in life. She was the first person I called through my tears, and I admittedly don't recall what I said exactly, but I know that I was just anxious to speak with her because I was all alone. And Stephanie is with us today. She is a rock star healthcare communications professional in the New York, New Jersey area. She's been a friend of mine for well over 30 years. She is the very first person who met Doug when I first started dating him, more than 20 years ago. So she knew Doug and I as a couple very intimately. And as I mentioned, she has been around for everything. So Stephanie, thank you for joining me today.
Samina, thank you. This is such a hard but important subject to discuss. I'm sorry I'm here, but I'm glad I can be here for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what's really important is this is a podcast really meant not just about grief, but how to support someone in grief. And sometimes that means going through your own emotions, but figuring out how to put them in a box for a moment and how to show up. And I can't think of anyone who did that more elegantly than you. You certainly knew Doug, gosh, for as long as I knew Doug. And we had the pleasure of having you visit just a few months before he passed away. When I made that call to you, I know I woke you up. What were you going through on your end as I made that call? Again, admittedly, I don't remember. I'm sure I was crying. I don't know what I said. Just walk me through what that was like for you and what you did and kind of what your reactions were.
Absolutely. It was really a surreal experience. I was just about to get up. My alarm had not gone off yet for work, so I was in between half asleep and waking up, and I remembered the phone ringing, buzzing, and I looked at it, and it was you, and I thought 3 o'clock, 3:15-ish. I thought maybe it was an accidental dial. So I picked up the phone kind of chipper, and I said, "Did you mean to call me?" And I just heard your voice, and your voice sounded so little and so far away. And, I was still waking up and still processing. And I think when I said, "Hey, did you mean to call me?" And you said something along the lines of, "I did. There's been a terrible accident. I'm in the hospital with Doug, and he's not going to make it." And I think I was struck dumb. I couldn't even fathom what you were saying. And it took me a bit of time to really comprehend what you were saying. I did not know what to say. My heart was pounding. I wanted to get to you as quickly as I could. And I'm in New Jersey, and I'm thinking to myself, how quickly can I get out to see Samina and the girls? First thoughts for me were just, I was devastated for you. I was shocked. I was scared. I was just dumbfounded. And I just really, I couldn't fathom. I just had this image of you in a hospital room with Doug hooked up to tubes and just couldn't really fathom what was happening. And I think you said he's still with us. And I didn't know if I should be on the phone with you or if I should let you go to be with him. And I think I just said, is there anybody I can call? And I'm coming out immediately. Like, I will be there today. And I think I kind of maybe cut the call short because I really, truly didn't know what else to say. I listened. And I think there was a long pause, right? I was there for you. I could hear you breathing. I think you could hear I was breathing. So we had that connection. And I think perhaps just being there for you might have been helpful. We agreed to disconnect. And the next person I was going to call was our friend Andrea. And I got on the phone with her immediately and explained to her what happened. And again, she went through the very similar process of just not comprehending, not really understanding. Got off the phone with her, and then I sat for a minute. My whole body started shaking. I think it was one of those delayed responses where your brain hasn't caught up with what your heart is feeling, and all of a sudden it caught up. And immediately from there, I explained what was going on to my husband, and he couldn't believe it. And we were both processing, and I was getting angry at him because he wasn't understanding what I was saying. And I remember just saying, I've got to get to California. And my husband was extremely supportive. He said, absolutely. I ran to the computer. I saw I could get an 8:30 flight. I was panicked. How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? I'm going to pack a bag. And we agreed, my husband and I agreed I would take the 11:30 flight. That gave me some time to just recenter, regroup. And I think, you were going through what you were going through on your end with the final stages of Doug's passing. And I was on the plane.
I remember that. I remember you being the person I wanted to speak with the most, just the one person who I knew could, just make me feel better. It was always throughout our entire marriage. If I couldn't talk to Doug, I could talk to you. You were my two people. And all I can remember is I came home and you were there. Somehow I had spoken with you in New Jersey, and then, like magic, you were at my house. I just remember thinking in hindsight, like, what an amazing friend. How did she do that? How did that happen? And also, at my worst, how blessed I am. Like, my God, she came right away. We didn't come from big families, Doug or I. You've always been my sister. So it was just unbelievable that you were there so quickly. And you were there for when I told the girls, for everything that followed in those immediate days. You knew Doug, obviously, really well. He adored you so much. What was that like, kind of coming into the house, knowing I was broken, but also knowing it was his house? It was, he's all over he's all over our house. And you had just visited us like 2 months earlier.
I had time on the plane to try to regroup and get my head together. And I just kept thinking of the last visit that I had with you and Doug. And to be honest, Doug is like a brother to me, a very close friend and brother. I mean, you are my sister. And it was just so wonderful to see you find your person after all of the shenanigans that we lived through as single women in New York, and many different career things, dating life, family. He became part of my family, and I felt like I kind of grew along with you. Of course, you had your relationship with him, but I experienced it with you as a friend. When he was so welcoming, he brought me in. He treated me like a little sister. Fortunately, he and my husband Ray got along quite well. They were both from Long Island, and very similar upbringing and very similar sense of dry humor. And I was there for you. So I did have to compartmentalize. I will tell you, I put my sunglasses on while I was in flight, and I was bawling my eyes out. And I said to the person next to me, I'm so sorry. I've just lost a family member. And, I apologize. I'll be okay. But, this is what's going on with me. And so I think I was thinking about that. And I was thinking about the girls. I was really thinking short term, to be honest with you, because that's all I could do was process how to get there, how to provide you with comfort. And when I got into the house, I was thinking about you and the girls and what I could do for you and the girls. And I had to put Doug's passing aside. I grieved a little bit on the plane, but I knew I needed to be there for you. It wasn't about me. It was about you and what kind of comfort I could bring to you. And if it was listening and telling fun stories about Doug, if it was telling you to go up to sleep, if it was trying to make sure that people who were in your house had food, answering the phone, answering the doorbell, but it was really the immediate sort of triaging what I could.
What you just said is something that I really, in hindsight, have gotten to appreciate more. Many people brought me comfort. You, of course, exemplary among them. But some people really did try and just, unintentionally slighted, because what I realized, it was because they were uncomfortable with it. Because as a society, we're uncomfortable with death and the thought of death. But what they were also uncomfortable with was, what if I say the wrong thing? What do I say? And you just hit on something so important. And, you said it wasn't about me. And that's, I think, something that's so important for everyone listening and watching to recognize. Someone else's passing, when you are the person in a support role, isn't about you or your discomfort, what you feel or what you are uncertain of. You have to kind of get through that awkwardness and focus on the other person. And I think that's what you did just so beautifully. You attended to everything. I mean, I don't know what I was even like. I don't remember what I was like. I don't remember conversations. I remember people who visited. I actually do remember that, but I don't remember the content of discussions. I don't remember so much. It's like all a blur. So, this is one of the first conversations we're having about those very raw, early days. One of the things, out of many things you did, was you wrote his obituary for me. And you wrote all of the social media for me, and I reviewed it. And I don't know if I asked you to, or if you knew to, or can you just walk me through where we were with that? But, that's something that everyone needs to go through. What was the genesis of that?
First of all, when I got to the house, you were in complete shock. And, people handle shock differently. And your shock, it was interesting because you were just coming to terms with, how could this happen? This isn't real. Why me? Why Doug? Why the girls? You were asking why, and it was just all of us. We couldn't believe. And I think just listening and again, breathing with you and being a body there and not even trying to fill the airspace. It was about you and letting you talk and process. And of course, Doug is such a dear man, and I still talk about him in the present. It's really hard to talk about him in the past, but he was such a wonderful person, and I just, wanted to be there for you, thinking about Doug saying, all right, Koze, step up and be there for Samina and do whatever she needs, but keep her straight also. Keep her in line. And, keeping you in line, you did an amazing job on your own. You were, as I said, you were quite social with the people who were in the room. But then, I was looking at you and I said, you got to go to bed. Like, let us go. Like, we're here. You need to go up and get some sleep. You need some time to just be. And I think you were just so exhausted. And I don't know if if you had started taking any anxiety medication, I'm not sure. But I felt like you were also sort of not present with us. You were there. Your eyes were somewhere else. Your brain was somewhere else. And that's when I think I finally said, you need to go up and go to sleep because being here with us isn't working right now. So we had those types of situations where you would go up to sleep and we try to keep the house clean and orderly and thinking about, oh my gosh, the girls are coming home the next day. How are we going to process this? And I think you woke up and we sat with you and we had a conversation with you about how you were going to speak with the girls. And it was really you processing. It wasn't us telling you what to say or how to say it. It was kind of us asking questions. I think I may have said to you, well, what do you want to say to them? How do you want to say it? Like, what are you feeling? What do you think is going to work best for them? And these were questions we took a lot of time to answer. And, time passed and elapsed. We went through that cycle again. I think we got you water. We tried to keep you physically strong because we knew you had to be there for the girls. Just going through that process, it was again, what can we do for you? What can we do for the girls? And then when I was there, when you told the girls, all of us were so anxious and stressed. And I remember the girls came in and they said, Aunt Stephanie, what are you doing here?
I remember that. I remember that.
Initially, I said, I was out here for work and I wanted to stop by because we need to still give people you time to figure out where you're going to go have that conversation with them. And I didn't want to be the person to explain what happened.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening and watching, cards a sequence of events. My husband passed away early on a Friday, and because his accident happened after the kids had gone to bed. I had sent them away with a nanny, and asked her to keep them for the day. And when it had happened, I just wanted them to have one more day of happiness. I couldn't tell them right away, so I let them have a good time the day he died, and that was the day that you arrived, and it was the morning actually that he passed away. So I dealt with that on my own with all of you until I told the girls the following morning.
You're such a loving mother, and you wanted to protect those kids as long as you could, and it worked out. I think they were able to have a good time with their nanny, and you were able to take some time to really process, or at least begin to process. So you had some time to think about how you wanted to convey the news to the girls. And none of us had any idea what to expect. We were sitting outside in the girls' play area. I remember you taking them into the room and explaining. And one of the girls, I don't know if it was Ariel, started crying, I think. And Olivia said, "How are we going to eat?" As sad as it was also just so real.
Yeah, they handled it very differently. They did. But Doug was such an amazing chef. And yeah, so he made all of the meals. And, we had one of those marriages where I worked and was out, and he adored being a father, and he stayed home with them. And he was, as Ariel said when I told her, he was her everything. But, I want to, you spoke to the kids. They love and adore you. You wrote the obituary. I believe you also set up a website. I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, you set up a website. And can you kind of walk through all of the things you did to kind of lighten my load at that moment?
All of us were trying to figure out what to do. And you had a very close friend who was cooking and was able to, as a former teacher, she was able to interact really well with the girls. And I was trying to figure out, what is my purpose? How can I help Samina? How can I help the family? And I write for a living. And, I knew Doug as well as anybody in that room. And I felt like, just having so many conversations with Doug just about life in general, what his goals were, what really got him excited, his essence, what he really excelled at. And I thought maybe I could try to write a tribute to Doug and help you at least get something on paper, get something started so that you could really work what you wanted to say, because you're obviously a beautiful writer. And from a personal perspective, you knew there were things that you wanted to convey. And so I just remember thinking about Doug as a human and how he was so witty and so creative and loved his job when he was working and excelled at being a professional, and just had such a knack for being able to pull people in and people together from different backgrounds and different interests, and how he just pulled the puzzle together and made a beautiful picture of everything that he did. And so writing that obituary was something I knew I could do and did for you. And then the social content for his LinkedIn profile, you had talked a little bit about what you wanted to convey. And part of this was listening to you and not trying to be heavy-handed with the direction. You have a very strong belief in different things and how you like to handle things. And so I needed to be very careful, and think about you as a human and what would work well for you. And so I asked questions and I made suggestions, but I never said, you need to do this or you must do that. Some other friends who have different relationships with you were probably able to do that, but I knew our relationship and what we had was more of sort of a mutual give and take. I came at, obituary from that perspective and the social media posts. And I think there were some things you wanted to say that I thought, well, let's dial it back a little bit. And, you were very receptive to that. And then we worked on the burial website a little bit and working on a fund for the girls.
Yeah, that's so interesting because to this day it haunts me a little bit. I remember you also served as like an intermediary between my contacts in the professional world and me. And I remember you were saying, well, people want to know what they can do, what they can do. And I remember I couldn't think. I
Yeah.
just couldn't think. And so I blurted out because I was so overly, maybe not overly, but so concerned about the children. Like, oh my gosh, they've lost their father. Oh my gosh, they've lost everything. That I just blurted out like a fund for the kids. And, in retrospect, when the fog began to lift, I was like, well, that seemed kind of tone deaf. It's not like I needed money or anything. I mean, that wasn't it, but it must have seemed tone deaf to the people who were asking. What time has given me is you should never ask a person who's going through that what they need, because we don't know in that moment. Don't give us another job to do. Don't give us another mental burden to our already very heavy load.
And I do think people wanted to do something. And sending flowers is lovely. Donating to have trees, established and constellations named. Those are all really beautiful things. And people did come up with those things on their own. But for people who didn't know what to do, having a fund for the kids' education, and even if it was fun to take them on vacation, it was something to try to give them respite and to give you respite. And, my family members certainly and other people I know were happy to be able to contribute in some way. And so for them, it was taking action and being able to make that contribution.
Yeah, and that absolutely is fair. But I think, there's such a lesson in that, just, from my experience, it was that's just an option for people, like when people don't know what to do, because you're right, the script is you send flowers. And I remember throwing out all of those dead flowers, sobbing, 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 thinking, dead flowers, my dead husband, it's all dead. Those are the things that we do by rote. And, I admit I was one of those people too. I mean, I've done that, but this is a very different loss. You were with me when I lost my dear friend Lisa. You were with me when I lost my mother. This is a very different loss. This, you lose your identity. You lose who you are as a person, your place in this world, your place in your life. And so, what I so appreciated is what you said earlier about you listened, you asked, you didn't presume. I think in some regards there, the taking charge stuff does work. And, it depends on what the situation is. But with something that is so deeply personal, like an obituary and the words we want to say and the words we want to express, that is so, so very important. And listening is the key. And that's something you're so wonderful at. Your empathy and your listening skills are bar none. And that's why you're always my source of comfort. And, something also that I appreciated was the gentle way you asked and you guided me, like, maybe we should have a cup of tea, and have you had any water? And it was not drink this, or you should, you haven't drank in a while, you should do this or that, because, I was a type A in control person, and this strips away every semblance of control you have. So that to be told by someone to do something is absolutely not the right way to do it, because In that moment, I know what I need to do. I know I need to say goodbye to my husband, if organize some sort of an event, all of the things you have to do. And then, of course, all of the administration work. Those are things I have to do. But taking care of yourself in that moment is not on your list of priorities.
One of the things I would say as a friend, right, if the person is fortunate enough to have a very strong, wonderful group of friends that loved both the spouse and the survivor, try to find your place. And, there were certain people that were very strong and took control of certain things. I knew I was not a chef, I was not a cook, so I was staying out of the kitchen. But I would say as a friend, trying to support an individual who's going through a terrible grieving process, to think about what you can bring to the table that would be helpful, that may not be duplicative of what somebody else is doing, because there's so much to be done. And our close friends, every single one of our close friends contributed and offered support in some way and did something to try to help.
I truly believe that the company you keep is a reflection of who you are. And I've been so fortunate to have you and our, other close friends in our lives, because this is one of those moments where you need people, you need a village, you need to be surrounded. This is not something that you can be left alone with, to muddle around on your own. It's so detrimental to yourself, to if there are children involved, and you need that support. You talked about being able to, see beyond you into what I need. One of the things you did that, I also was so appreciative of is, the support and care has never stopped. You call me regularly, you text me regularly, you check in on me. And it's not, when it was my birthday, it's not happy birthday, with an exclamation mark with a little text confetti thing. It's, I'm thinking of you today, and, giving you a gentle hug, or, it's something very thoughtful to let me know I'm thought about, I'm not forgotten, but it's also respecting where I am now in life. And how do you do that? How do you kind of, if everyone could have a Stephanie in their life, they'd be so lucky. But what is your secret to that? Because you are the person who has brought me the most comfort over these past 2 years.
How do I do it? I'm real. That's my essence. And, everybody's got a strength, and I am a person, a friend that supports and is there, and you are a family member to me. And, I'll always be there. I think the gentle guidance and listening, it's because I know who you are, right? And so your friends who know you really well, they can operate in that manner. There are friends that play different roles, and I will never stop being in your life or the girl's life. I may not know the right thing to say, but I try. And I'm glad that I've been able to provide you a source of comfort. And, for me, again, it's being part of who you are, your friendship, and knowing you for so long, and knowing Doug, and just wanting to do the right thing for both of you. And I think the friendship that we had, Doug knew me as that person also, right? He didn't know me as the person. I mean, he probably thought I was a little crazy, and I am. And he would chuckle at some of the antics of us living in New York, and the stress, anxiety, and all of that. But I think he also appreciated me because of the give and take and the interaction and just my persona.
Absolutely. He adored you. He thought of you as family just as much. And, you've also been so present for the girls. And I think, if we were to look at everything we're unpacking here, it's cultivate the friends you have now before you have one of these terrible life events, because, one day we will all lose our spouse, and we're going to go, and we would want that same support for our spouse. Find the unique thing that you can add value to and take off of someone's plate, and play to your strengths. And you definitely did that. One of the things that you've also done to be very, very supportive is you have taken on a supercharged role with my daughters.
Oh,
And that's so important too. I mean, they love you, they adore you, they talk with you on the phone, they get excited when I'm talking with on the phone, and they snatch the phone away from me. But it's also, the thought too, if there are children involved, don't forget the children. Because as much as you supported me, you supported our family. And part of that is giving the girls the stability and the comfort that they need to know that even though their daddy is not going to be with them, they are loved. They are part of a big circle of love, and they've got trusted adults who will always be there for them, and who are part of their family. And it's one of those things that, because, we don't have a blood relation, large blood relation family, those relationships are really, really important. And I think, what people can do to support a grieving spouse is if they have children, a grieving parent is also grieving for their children, grieving for all of the memories that will never happen for them in their future. And, kind of being present in a way that also takes you a little bit, distracts you off of your own grief course because, you're so consumed. I'm never going to rest another day, quite honestly, until my children are adults because I'm so worried about what happens to them. And I think that's also something that you've really just stepped into so beautifully. You are, the auntie that they love, they want to talk with, they want to come visit you, they love your dog, they love their Uncle Ray cat, and that's so important too.
But it's interesting because you were out of it, right? And shocked and grief, filled with grief. And the next day after you told the kids, I had them with Doug's mom, and we went into San Francisco and went to the Children's Museum. And I think,
Oh,
right,
I
one of the
forgot about
things,
that.
yes, I was like, wow, I took your Tesla, which I don't drive normally, and I'm on the California Thruway, whatever it was, headed into San Francisco. But it was important because you needed some space and the kids needed a little sense of fun and normalcy. And so it's important to be there to support the children and let them grieve as they grieve, not to force, right? And so I was glad, and I think Karen, it was a very difficult day, but I think it also we were able to just watch the kids enjoy themselves. They were sad at times, of course, but they had this really interesting experience playing with all sorts of chemistry things and artwork, and the Children's Museum was beautiful. So, the point is, as far as children, they all grieve in their own way. And to be there again and to listen. And I remember Olivia saying, I can't cry. Daddy wouldn't want me to cry. And I remember saying, it's okay to cry. And this is really sad stuff. He would want you to cry if that's what if would make you feel better. It was just interesting to hear her say, Daddy wouldn't want me to cry. And it just broke my heart for her. But again, just listening to the kids and trying to affirm them and comfort them without being heavy handed, but being there to let them know, they're gonna be okay. But their life is different. And I don't think I sugarcoated with the kids. I think I said, it is not the same. It will be different. It is going to be different.
Yeah, it's so interesting you brought that up. I completely forgot about the Children's Museum because I only really have a faint memory of that whole period of time was such a blur. And I remember when I think you were sitting on the stairs when you
Oh,
were asking her to cry. I can't remember. That's just a fractured memory of mine. And here we are more than 2 years after Doug died. And I have to tell you just how, the timeliness of your comment. Last week, Olivia has been suffering from nightmares. And the nightmares have been consistent for probably 2 weeks, the previous 2 weeks. And every night it was a scenario of our dog dying. And it was just like 100 different ways this dog could die. And she would wake up and she didn't sleep for 2 weeks. And I finally had a conversation with her because I had a feeling it was because she still has not cried more than 2 years into it. And she told me she couldn't. She gave me so many reasons why she couldn't cry. One of them was it would make me sad if
oh,
she cried. And so I said, Mommy will cry about Daddy, whether you cry or not. And I said, it will make you feel better and it'll make all the big feelings come out of you so you can make room in your heart for other feelings. And with that, she bawled. She finally cried. And this was just last week. And she went to sleep next to me. And she woke up the next morning. She woke me up and she said, "Mommy, guess what? I didn't have a bad dream." And so thank you for sharing that, because it was just very timely that you raised that, because it literally just happened. But, I think also when people are supporting a grieving spouse, don't ignore the children. I think there's such a fallacy in our society that children are resilient. And I am here to tell you that children are not resilient. That those are people who've never experienced or witnessed a child in trauma or grief.
Yeah.
That is something adults like to say because I think it's, makes them feel better. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard it, and I can't tell you how angry I get every time I hear it. So I'm going to say it again. Children are not resilient. Children who've undergone trauma and grief are not resilient. And it's so important to be, the person who's supporting a grieving spouse, if there are children involved, to take the time and not ignore those children. Don't show up just for the parent. The children are very much a part of that whole process.
And they grieve differently. I remember when I was out, maybe it was the past year, and we went to a park. And, I didn't think about it initially. And then Olivia was having a great time running around, and Ariel, who loves to be on the gym equipment and she's so physically active, and she just kind of pulled to the side and was hiding almost. First I said, "Are you okay?" And then I didn't dig into it, but afterwards I realized she was sad because people were there with their dads. I didn't address it with her at the time, but I think I mentioned to you where, I thought perhaps she was having a hard time being at the park because of the father. So maybe we don't go to the park for a while.
Yeah, you raise another good point. Children are not little adults. I mean, they're not emotionally developed. They don't have the coping mechanisms or the emotional intelligence or maturity to process this. So they do grieve very differently. But you've stepped into a role where, I think they're doing okay. I think if people meet them today, they would not know that they had undergone such significant trauma and are still, going through grief. But I think, just being present is so important, being thoughtful about the role you can play based on your strengths, putting yourself and your discomfort aside and thinking, how can I really help this person is so very important. And it's probably the most selfless thing you can do in this type of a situation. Thinking about the children, stepping up for children is such a relief and welcome comfort for parents because, we're worrying about our children every second of every day now, more so than other parents, because we have more to worry about. And it's been such a gift to us.
The thing about my experience with Doug's passing is that I made a concerted effort. I cried with you, but you didn't see my breakdown cry. When I was there that week, the first week, I remember going up the hill where we used to walk. Doug loved to walk. And I just sat right before the fence that went out into the pasture, sat on a rock. Actually, it went around the fence, sat on a rock and bawled my eyes out. And I think, for the friend or the family member who is supporting the person who is grieving, take care of yourself as well, right? You don't have to do it in front of the person who's grieving, but make sure you take some time to process the person's passing because, I lost Doug. You lost him. He was your husband and your love and your person. And I lost a really good friend also. And I think I lost sight of initially, I was so focused on you and the girl that I didn't give myself space to grieve. And so finally I was like, I gotta let it out. So I walked up the hill and let it out.
Yeah, that's such an important reminder because you're right. In that moment, you're our caregiver. Yeah, and caregiving is a very difficult, emotionally, mentally draining act. And I did appreciate all the times you cried with me. And I was, you meet us in our grief when you cry with us, because we never want our person erased. We don't want their memory gone. We want to see how much everyone is hurting with us. It doesn't make us more sad. It makes us feel less alone. You're so correct. You do have to take care of yourself because this was everyone's loss. And I think that's what's also really important. You lost your Doug. I lost my Doug. The girls lost their daddy. Everyone lost a piece of themselves the day he died.
Yeah.
And, so many people, everyone talks about him still today. And so that's such a wonderful tribute to him, to the man he was, to the person he was, the friend he was, the father he was, and the husband he was.
Absolutely. I see his sparkling eyes, and it's hard to believe he's gone, but his spirit is with us always, and just his humor and how he lived his life, it's something you'll never forget. I won't ever forget.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Stephanie. I so value you as a person. I love you like a sister. Again, I wish everybody had a Stephanie in their life.
You're welcome. And I would just say, in closing, like you've lived a million lifetimes in just a short couple of years. And, it's been really sad, difficult, but also quite enlightening and inspiring to see how you have and are still going through the grieving process, but yet, moving forward and trying to take what you've experienced and try to help others with it. And that's just really something incredible to see. So kudos to you for sharing the sad things that you've had to go through, but also to help people as they go through their grief.
Thank you.